Number 5. Richard Allen Davis. Davis was convicted in Santa Clara County Superior Court in 1996 for the kidnapping and murder of Polly Klaas and was subsequently housed on California's death row at San Quentin State Prison. He looked like someone's troubled neighbor, quiet, forgettable. That was exactly the problem. On the night of October 1st, 1993, 12-year-old Polly Klaas was having a slumber party at her family home in Petaluma, California. Richard Allen Davis, a career criminal with a documented history of kidnapping and assault, entered through an unlocked window while her parents slept nearby. He bound Polly's friends with torn pillowcases, whispered threats to keep them silent, and disappeared into the night with Polly in his arms. What followed was one of the largest volunteer search efforts in California history. Her face was everywhere. The nation held its breath. Davis had been paroled just months before the abduction, his third parole, despite 2 prior kidnapping convictions. The system had released him, and he had done exactly what his record suggested he would. Investigators caught a break when Davis was stopped by Sonoma County Sheriff's deputies on an unrelated matter the night of the abduction. His name was run. Nothing flagged. He was released. That clerical failure would haunt law enforcement for years. Davis was arrested in December 1993 after leading investigators to Polly's remains. He was convicted of first-degree murder with special circumstances in 1996 and sentenced to death. In a courtroom moment widely reported in national media, Davis made an obscene gesture towards Polly's father during sentencing, a moment that crystallized publicly and permanently exactly who Richard Allen Davis was. He remains on death row at San Quentin to this day. The 2 friends who witnessed the abduction reported that Davis told them, "Don't scream or I'll slit your throats," and then calmly walked out the door. They were never harmed. No one has ever fully explained why.
Number 4. Scott Lee Peterson. Peterson was convicted of first-degree murder in Stanislaus County Superior Court in 2004 for the death of his pregnant wife, Laci Peterson, and was transferred to death row at San Quentin State Prison following sentencing. He called the family on Christmas Eve to say he'd gone fishing. His wife was missing. He sounded calm. Laci Peterson, 8 months pregnant, disappeared from her Modesto, California home on December 24, 2002. Her husband, Scott Peterson, reported her missing that evening after returning, he said, from a solo fishing trip to San Francisco Bay. What he didn't mention was that he'd recently taken out a $250,000 life insurance policy on Laci, or that he was having an affair, or that he had told his girlfriend, Amber Frey, that he had lost his wife before Laci was even reported missing. Police developed suspicions almost immediately. Scott's behavior was, by documented investigative accounts, strikingly detached. He sold Laci's car, he dyed his hair, and grew a goatee. When police put him under surveillance, he was found with $15,000 in cash, multiple cell phones, his brother's ID, and camping gear, apparently preparing to flee to Mexico. In April 2003, the bodies of Laci and her unborn son, Connor, washed ashore in San Francisco Bay, near the exact location where Scott claimed he'd been fishing. The trial was one of the most watched in American television history. In November 2004, Scott Peterson was convicted of first-degree murder for Laci's death and second-degree murder for Connor's. He was sentenced to death. In 2020, the California Supreme Court overturned his death sentence, not his conviction, citing juror misconduct during selection. A resentencing hearing in 2021 resulted in life without the possibility of parole. He remains at San Quentin. To this day, no physical evidence directly placing Scott at the scene of Laci's death has ever been publicly confirmed. The prosecution's case was entirely circumstantial, and it convinced 12 jurors. unanimously.
Number 3. William George Bonin. Bonin was convicted in Los Angeles County and Orange County Superior Courts on 14 counts of first-degree murder and was housed on death row at San Quentin State Prison, where he was executed by lethal injection on February 23, 1996. He picked them up on the freeway. He was charming. He had a van. And for over a year, no one connected the bodies. Between 1979 and 1980, the bodies of young men and teenage boys began appearing along Southern California's freeways with disturbing regularity. Investigators initially struggled to establish a definitive pattern. The victims were dumped across multiple counties, complicating jurisdictional coordination. What they didn't yet know was that a single man was responsible for most of them. His name was William George Bonin. He had a documented history that should have made him a known danger. He had prior convictions for sexually assaulting young males and had served time in a California state hospital where he was evaluated as a high risk for reoffense. He was released anyway. Within years, he was killing. Operating primarily with a rotating cast of accomplices, a documented and unusual feature of his crimes, Bonin abducted victims along Southern California freeways, often posing as a helpful driver. Investigators ultimately linked him to the murders of 14 young men and boys, ranging in age from 12 to 19. He was caught through a combination of surveillance and a tip. In June 1980, Bonin was arrested in the act of assaulting a victim inside his van in Huntington Park. The arrest cracked the case open. Accomplices were identified and turned on each other. Bonin was charged in both Los Angeles and Orange counties. He was convicted on all 14 counts and sentenced to death. On death row at San Quentin, Bonin was documented as cooperative with prison staff, a detail investigators and criminologists noted as consistent with his ability to present a non-threatening exterior to victims. He was executed on February 23, 1996. His last meal was 2 pepperoni and sausage pizzas, 3 servings of ice cream, and 15 cans of Pepsi, shared, at his request, with friends on death row. Despite his convictions on 14 counts, investigators have long believed Bonin's actual victim count was higher. Several cold cases from the same period remain officially unsolved.
Number 2. Wayne Adam Ford. Ford was convicted in Humboldt County and San Bernardino County, California, for 4 counts of first-degree murder and was sentenced to death, subsequently housed on death row at San Quentin State Prison. He walked into the Humboldt County Sheriff's Office on November 3, 1998, placed a small plastic bag on the counter, and said, "I think I need to turn myself in. I've got a problem." Inside the bag was a human breast. Wayne Adam Ford's self-surrender remains one of the most bizarre and disturbing voluntary confessions in California criminal history. Ford, a long-haul trucker, told investigators he had killed 4 women, all of whom had been reported as missing persons across multiple California counties over the preceding 2 years. The victims were later identified. Tina Renee Gibbs, found in the San Joaquin River in 1997. An unidentified woman found near Victorville, Jane Doe found near Lodi, and Patricia Tamez found near Buttonwillow. All 4 had been sexually assaulted. All had been killed. The investigation that followed reconstructed a cross-state pattern of predation the prosecutors argued Ford had conducted with deliberate operational planning, using his truck routes to select, abduct, and dispose of victims across jurisdictions, making detection significantly more difficult. Ford's motivation for turning himself in remains, by official accounts, partially unexplained. He told investigators he could not stop and knew he would kill again. Whether that constituted remorse, psychological breakdown, or something else has never been definitively established.
He was convicted on 4 counts of first-degree murder and sentenced to death in 2006. His self-surrender forced California law enforcement to confront a documented gap. At least 2 of his victims had gone unconnected across county lines for over a year, flagging serious issues with interagency communication that persisted for years afterward. One of Ford's victims has never been officially identified. Somewhere, a family still doesn't know.
Number 1. Clarence Ray Allen. Allen was convicted in Fresno County, California, of 3 counts of first-degree murder with special circumstances and was executed at San Quentin State Prison on January 17, 2006, one of the oldest and most physically debilitated inmates ever executed in the United States. He orchestrated murders from inside a prison cell, then he was sent back to prison to be executed for them. Clarence Ray Allen's case is, by any measure, one of the most legally and morally complex in California death row history. In 1974, Allen, a Fresno area businessman, murdered Mary Sue Kitts to prevent her from reporting a burglary scheme he had organized. He was convicted and sent to Folsom Prison. From inside Folsom, Allen allegedly contracted a fellow inmate, Billy Ray Hamilton, to kill the witnesses who could testify against him in the original case. Hamilton was released in 1980. Within months, 3 people, Brian Schledowitz, Douglas Scott White, and Josephine Rocho, were shot and killed at Franz Market in Fresno. Multiple other victims survived. The case broke open when Hamilton and other co-conspirators were identified and prosecuted. Testimony established that Allen had orchestrated the killings from behind bars, passing instructions through the prison's network of contacts. Allen was convicted of 3 counts of first-degree murder with special circumstances and sentenced to death in 1982. He spent over 20 years on death row at San Quentin, during which time he suffered a heart attack, became legally blind and nearly deaf, and required a wheelchair. His attorneys argued that executing a man in his condition constituted cruel and unusual punishment. The California Supreme Court and the U.S. Supreme Court both declined to intervene. On January 17, 2006, Clarence Ray Allen was executed at San Quentin. He was 76 years old, the oldest person executed in California in over 50 years. Allen reportedly requested a full meal of fried chicken and sugar-free pecan pie before his execution. He was diabetic. He had allegedly also told inmates before his execution that he had arranged for anyone involved in his prosecution to be killed if he died. Law enforcement took the threat seriously enough to place individuals under protective watch. No attacks occurred.